Alright, so in this video I'm going to show how to set up the automatic LODs in Unreal and just kind of go through some of the settings and options for LODs in general. And so probably the first thing that comes up when you start wanting to generate LODs for a mesh is the LOD group. And Unreal ships with a few of these by default, and you can create your own, but I believe you have to edit, I forget the name of it, but there's a file you need to change somewhere. It should say on this page where it is, I forget. Oh yeah, locate the project's base engine INI file. And it should have settings like this in here. And these are the definitions for all those groups. So you can see they basically all have like a number of LODs. Level architecture seems like it has the most options. It has a field for a light map resolution and a silhouette importance, and a lot of these don't. Some of these are very simple, like Vista generates 1 LOD, Foliage 1 LOD. But then you have something like High Detail, which generates 6. Uses a percentage reduction of 50% with a pixel error of 6. And then these have like a pixel error of 10. They basically all have 50 for the triangle reduction. Most use 4 LODs. You can see High Detail, they seem to be setting this preset up for, well, higher detail meshes, which is why it has more LODs and this lower pixel error setting. And you could create your own and play with these settings. Might be a good idea if you're trying to do a larger project to create your own LOD defaults. And those are going to be what you want to use for like all your meshes. I believe Unreal mentions in here basically their methodology is you don't want to be doing all this by hand. That'll lead to inconsistencies and big problems if you try to do like a large change. With systems like this, it would be very easy to make sure everything fits, and if you make a change, apply it to everything automatically, and not worry about all these hand-keyed values by potentially hundreds of people, and you don't know what any of them are necessarily. But that's like an LOD group. So if I choose an LOD group, like, let's go for High Detail, it's going to take my one mesh, or my one LOD, and generate several others. And it shouldn't take all that long for it to do it, just a few seconds. There we go. Now I have 5 LODs, LOD 0 to 5. Like it said, it had LOD 6. So I've got my original, which had 63,000. And then LOD 1, cut that in half to 31,500. And then all the way down to LOD 5, which definitely doesn't look too good up close. But it's all the way down to 2,000. And if we put it back to auto, and we keep zooming out, you can see we can't even tell how terrible LOD 5 looks at this range. So it's honestly fine that it did that to the mesh. And you can set the minimum LOD. So I could set it to 3, set to auto, and now no matter what, it'll only load LOD 3. I mean, I generally would question using this in like a release. That might be good for tuning, or maybe if you have like a bit of an over-engineered LOD 0. Like I would say this is an over-engineered LOD 0. Like 63,000 triangles, that's kinda heavy. Maybe you do want to set like the minimum LOD to 2. Because, you know, that's pretty okay. I think most players aren't going to super appreciate the difference between LOD 0 and LOD 2. So this might be really good to set, maybe as a performance optimization for certain clients or just in general, because maybe you like the mesh, you want to use Unreal's auto generation, but you don't really think you need your over-engineered LOD 0. This is a quick and easy way to use lower quality LODs and not have to do any real work. You can just throw your overcomplicated mesh in Unreal and let it do most of the heavy lifting. You can set up overrides for specific platforms, so that could be very helpful. And also, there's this checkbox to auto-compute LOD distances. I'm going to uncheck that. I'm also going to check on custom up here, which brings up all of these. And it also shows us kind of very quickly at a glance. One, it has this generated tag for any LODs it's generated itself. And then it shows us the screen size percentage that's required to trigger the LOD. So you can see LOD 1 triggers at 0.936 of the screen. So basically, unless we are crazy zoomed in on this object, it's going to use LOD 1. And then LOD 2, quite a bit away, but honestly not all that hard to trigger. This is 0.427% of the screen, and then 3 is 0.18, and so that is back here. And that's still pretty close. Yeah, I'd like selected a vertice or something there. So it's shimmering, but LOD 4, 0.06, and then LOD 5, 0.025, which is quite a ways back. But I believe if we turn on auto compute, so like this becomes grayed out. We can't really see it. Screen size is hidden from us. Where did all that go? Here we go. So now if I click on like LOD 5, now that I have auto compute distance off, I can set the distance. So I could set this to... I could be silly and say, like, what happened if I did say like 0.5? Okay, it won't let me. It'll give me like the nearest value, but below that. If I go like 0.01, well now it'll be even further back. 0.001. Now that is quite small. I imagine it'll be like a pixel on your screen at that point. I'm not going to zoom out to test that. But as you can imagine, these will affect you scrolling in and out. Like a more easy one to test would be something like this, setting 1 to 0.05. Now we have LOD 0 out here. And we can't even get it to show us 1 because the zoom levels aren't fine enough. Need to use the left mouse button to zoom out slowly. Now we can hit LOD 1. 0, 1, and 2. They're right there because it's 0.5 and 0.427. And these screen sizes, if you turn it to auto compute, they are dependent on the triangle count, I believe. So if you come down here into reduction settings, see you have the termination method, which is triangles, vertices, and any. I would definitely stick on triangles in almost all cases. Weld threshold. Weld threshold's something I don't play with almost ever. I'm not entirely sure how it works either, but turning it up makes it so it kinda eats a lot of your mesh. You can't enter a negative value. If I were to put this to like 10, and I apply the change, and I let this update, and this is just going to be LOD 1, but we'll see what it does. And I know it basically totally destroys, it basically totally destroys the mesh. And so at 10, it's probably hard to guess what it is actually doing. But maybe at like 1, something a bit lower, we can kind of guess at what this option's doing. I can only imagine it's basically trying to annihilate small details. Yeah, it's just kind of like welding the band into the planks at this point. I mean, I've never really had a mesh where I'm like, yes, I'm going to fix everything with the welding threshold. I'm sure they put this here for a good reason. I just definitely don't know what that could be. Generally, whatever kind of reduction I'm trying to get, the best way is by changing the percent of the triangles. So I could lower this. I could say I don't want it to be 50% of LOD 0. I want this to be 10%. And what that should also do is adjust the screen size. Like right now it's 0.25 because, well, we're down to 12,000 triangles because of that weld threshold setting. And now we're down to 6,000, and so our screen size has been automatically set to 0.137. If I change the percent to 80%, we should have something very high, like a 0.95 or 7. I'm not really sure, but a very high screen size percent, because we're going to have a very high triangle count. That's not really what I expected. Screen size 0.5. Though we have 50,000 triangles. That doesn't seem right. Okay. Well, that is not what I expected at all. Oh wait, did I say I didn't mean 0.05. I wanted to do 50. That's right. I forgot for a second that the triangle percentage is not a 1 to 0 float. Oh, that is beautiful. 300 triangles. Yeah. It's a percentage. at a float percentage. Yeah, and so now that I'm at 50, it's 0.93. If I turn that up, is that going to go down again? 94%. You'd think, surely, this should go up. Right? I mean, that's what I would think. It goes down, but no. What if I go, like, 51? 1% over 50. Is it still going to be 0.5? Is it just anything over 50% automatically computes to 0.5? No. So there's definitely a small threshold there, where once you go too high, it just sets it down to 0.5 for some reason. So that's probably something to be aware of. You might not notice that if you don't actually come in here and check your screen size percentages. Yeah, 55 is 0.5. So alright. Okay. Perhaps the other thing worth noting is the reduction setting. They count down from this base LOD, which you could set to something else if you wanted. You could set this to LOD4, but by default it's LOD 0, and so this is going to be 3% of LOD 0. I know for me personally, the way I kind of assumed it worked was it was just a percentage of the previous LOD, but that is not how this works. Each LOD is generated based on the original LOD and not based on the LOD before it. And so, yeah, I think that basically covers these. You don't have that many settings. Yeah, I mean, there's the triangles. Let's try, like, vertices. No, not 0.3. I'm doing it again. Float percentages. Let's try 3% of the vertices and see what it does. We have 2,000 triangles now. It looks pretty awful. What about if we switch it to vertices? Will it look better? Worse? Definitely worse. Definitely we have way less triangles though, so let's yeah, let's do like 8. 8% of the vertices. See if we can get closer to 2,000 triangles again. See if this looks any better. I can't quite tell up against that background. Does that say 26 triangles? I think there are quite a bit more triangles here. I do think it looks a bit better. You know, it might be worth playing around with this setting here. Try to dial it in. Maybe some meshes will respond better to vertices than triangles. I do feel like it's probably about the same. And triangles are really kind of what counts more. Yeah, so this looks like a very similar triangle count. And a very similar level of absolute desolation of our barrel. There really aren't that many more settings or options to play with for the LODs. You know? If you don't check on custom, there's no like easy way to see all the LODs. You kind of have to use this LOD picker up here to go through them. And you can see your settings there. If you turn on custom, you can see them all together. So that's definitely something worth checking on if you're just trying to quickly validate like the screen size and the triangles of all your meshes. Your LOD group is going to change the amount and potentially the quality of the generated LODs. I'm not very sure. What if I turn on something like small prop? And I'm going to turn the LODs up to 6, which is probably the last setting I haven't really discussed, but you can go in and change the number of LODs generated. And so I kind of want to see LOD 5. I mean, that's like about the same, honestly. It's pretty awful still. I wouldn't say that's like super different. Maybe it is, but it's pretty awful, just like the other one. You could set it to 2 LODs or up to 8. I don't believe you can you can't manually key in higher values. But that's basically all there is to it. You've got your LOD groups, which you can go and create your own, which might be worth doing. But really, a lot of the settings in there don't make the biggest difference. So it might be worth, I usually use just the high detail setting. I might change the number of LODs. I might come in and change the triangle percentage. But normally that's all I would change. I generally leave the screen size to auto compute. Unless, I mean, no, I take that back. There have been a fair number of times where I've come in and I just feel like maybe the triangle count's too high for each LOD. And so I do set the screen size to be manual. And then I maybe tweak the triangles a bit. But generally I would say if you find yourself changing the triangles constantly, I would either create an LOD group where you set the triangle percentage to be something lower, like 35 or 30%, and that way every step down will be greater. So right now it's 50%, 50%, 50%, 50%. But if you set that to 30, it'll be 30, 30, 30, much lower steps. Or bigger steps. Every LOD will have less triangles that way. It will have a lower amount of triangles, a lower percentage of triangles.